Dystopia warning, obviously. Today could be the last Monday that we spend under a Conservative government for a very, very, very long time. And I've been reflecting a lot over the last couple of days about what will happen in the future, what the next government will do, what that entails for our politics moving forward over the next 5 years, 10 years. But I've also been thinking about the result on the night and how it's not a foregone conclusion that Labour will form the next government. A lot of that's probably down to apathy, hopelessness. The general mood at the moment isn't great, is it? Because we've had all of our hope and energy beaten out of us by enduring 14 years of upper class souls ruining our life. Ultimately, it comes down to what you do when you enter the polling booth. Not just actually going out and voting, but how you vote. I'm a huge advocate of voting tactically, because if we do that collectively, we have the opportunity to put the Conservatives into third place and make the Lib Dems our official opposition. It's achievable. We could relegate the Tories to the wankers' corner. They're trying to scare everyone with this whole, supermajority, Starmageddon bollocks. But yet they were more than happy to make that custard-based sex yeti, Boris Johnson, Prime Minister with a huge majority. More than happy to make the club mascot their leader, weren't they? And look at how that turned out. Do you think Keir Starmer would have let the VIP lanes happen? Do you think he would have let everyone in Number 10 party? Do you think he would have held parties himself? No. I'm voting Labour on July the 4th. The reason I'm voting Labour on July the 4th is personal, not tribal personal, but because I know firsthand the difference that a Labour government can make. Gordon Brown's policies transformed my family's life. I was just starting secondary school when the last Labour government came to power, and Gordon Brown's policies lifted millions of kids and elderly people out of poverty. The most redistributive government since the Second World War. And he had to do that via stealth. Have a think about why he had to do that via stealth. Our family felt the benefit of that. I was still receiving free school meals. I still wore the same hand-me-down blazer for the entire 5 years of my schooling. My family didn't even have a car until I was about 14, and then it was a second-hand Sierra. I know what it's like to feel ashamed to bring friends back to your house because it's tiny, especially when you live in one of the few council houses in a very affluent village that border a private school. I learned very quickly the reality of things, to the point that when I eventually become Prime Minister one day, I'm going to bring in toff hunting, in which poor people dressed as foxes just hound rich people out of their manners. It's not just about what you go through in terms of not having the same as everyone else when you grow up with nothing. It's the impact that it has on your confidence for most of your life. That massively impacts your prospects moving forward, because you're made to feel like being poor is a moral failure. And no one takes greater pleasure in terms of ramming that message home than those toff fuckers in the Conservative Party, because it deflects from everything that they've done to put people into those conditions. Kids should not be going to school with empty tummies. Nurses that have worked a hard shift should not be going to a food bank. There was like 35 food banks when Labour left office last time. Now there's thousands. And these are working people too that are needing these. Even if people aren't working, they deserve dignity rather than feeling like they're living in a Victorian novel. Nor should they be blamed and further shamed for the circumstances that they find themselves in, because any of us, unless we're millionaires, could find ourselves in that position. And even if, you think people are scroungers, why make the kids suffer it? There was a thing going around on Twitter the other day talking about what image you're going to have in your mind when you go and make your decision at the polling booth. A lot of people shared the image of the Queen sitting on her own wearing a mask, when the night before most of Number 10 were partying and doing Class A drugs. A lot of the Partygate pictures resurfaced. The image that I have in my mind, well, there's two actually. The first is that little boy who says, "I try not to eat a lot in a day," from that Channel 4 documentary. That's pretty difficult to forget. And the other is that poor little toddler face down, drowned on a beach after the small boat that he was in capsized. People deserve to live their lives with dignity. People deserve the right to a better life. There's been a lot of talk about reforms racism over the last couple of days. which is shocking to nobody. And the comments aimed at Rishi Sunak were, of course, deplorable. It's also important to note that this Conservative government has spent at least the last 8 years since Brexit adopting a kind of blue kip Farage approach, which dehumanises asylum seekers and people of colour alike in this country that are nationals, that are made to feel like they're not properly British if they're black. Their culture wars have contributed to an increase in hate crime and racism and division, which they're more than happy to go along with when their own donors like Frank Hester, who's donated millions, can say things like Diane Abbott makes him hate all black people and calling for people to be shot. That's fine when they're coughing up the money, isn't it? Any racism, however unfortunate, directed at this Conservative government has been caused by the conditions that they've created to increase racism for everybody in this country that is not white. And then you get the reform lot, don't you? Trying to think that calling them a gammon is racist. Or you get people, pearl clutching with a faux sense of morality about Banksy releasing a raft with props of asylum seeker children in it during an Idols set at Glastonbury. Both Banksy and Idols are artists that comment on the inequalities that are existing in this country. They call out xenophobia, racism, classism. It's a protest in a country in which they've tried to outlaw protest. And thank fuck people are trying to call it out. I've spent 4 years trying to do it myself, and every step of the way they've tried to silence me. Yeah, I grew up without a voice, and I'm fucked if I'm going to let them take it away from me as an adult that has learned the hard way all of my life what it's like to be considered scum because I'm poor, to be told to shut up because I'm a woman. Do I think Labour will do a better job? Absolutely, yeah, I do. We could have the most working class government that we've ever had with this new Labour government. Finally, we will not have privileged Etonians making our decisions for us. Everything that I've done over the last 4 years has been done with the most vulnerable people in mind. It's been done as a protest against what this government has done to the people of this country. Hundreds of thousands of people were dead because of them. And in some way, it's been done to avenge the smaller part of me that didn't have anyone to advocate for her. It's also been a protest against the press in this country, who are horrifically biased towards the right, evident in their widespread enabling of this Conservative government and platforming of Nigel Farage. I want press reform and voter reform. But in the first instance, I'm voting to remove the threat and the emergency. Apathy is high. If we don't go out and vote to get a Conservative out, or think, oh, Labour are just going to win in my area anyway, I can vote for that person who hasn't got a shot in hell, you're just helping a Conservative. Now is not the time to fuck about, frankly. I'm voting Labour with a clear conscience, without any caveats, not based on any tribal reasoning, but purely pragmatic. It's an emergency. If your house is on fire, you don't sit there and squabble about how left-wing the hose is. You put the fire out. Britain deserves better than the indignity of laying in a hospital corridor, pissing in a bottle because the NHS is in crisis, or pulling your own teeth out, or your nan deciding whether or not she freezes or starves to death. So go into the polling booth with the most vulnerable person that you can think of in mind and make a decision not just for yourself, but for them. And do it with the knowledge of how first past the post works. Vote tactically. Eviscerate the Conservative Party.